Hello listeners, and welcome to Plugged In, the energy news podcast from Montel, where we bring you the latest news, issues and changes happening in the energy sector. We are 6 months on from the blackout that brought parts of Spain, Portugal and even France to a standstill. On the 3rd of October, European TSO body ENTSO-E published its much anticipated review of the system conditions around the time of the incident. Whilst the main conclusions drawn from the 264-page document was undoubtedly the overvoltage that triggered a cascade of generation losses, there are still many questions left unanswered. Crucially, what key information was missing from the report? Will we ever conclusively be able to identify the parties responsible? And how has the blackout become a much bigger political and problematic issue for Spain's energy market? In this episode, I'm going to be speaking to experts about the state of Iberia's energy market since April and what the political and market repercussions of the blackout have been. But first, I'm joined by our Spain editor, Pablo Bronte. Pablo, a warm welcome back on the pod.
Hola, Richard.
Could you just take us back to that momentous day, the 28th of April? What happened and what kind of investigations have been ongoing since then?
Well, we are used to once-in-a-lifetime events in the last few years, right? The blackout was one of those, certainly. It's meant a massive disruption of daily life for 9, 12, 16 hours, depending on the area of the country. Card payments, trains, telephone communications, even internet connection, everything was disrupted. So after that, we've seen several investigations from the government, from power grid operator, that's Red Eléctrica, from Spanish utilities too. They all pointed to the same root cause. Everything began with voltage issues that caused generation units to trip. This is also something that the last report from ENTSO-E highlighted. But the new report from the European body of TSOs, as you mentioned, didn't really explain the reason for the first events triggering the blackout, or more importantly, who's to blame.
Perfect, Pablo. I think it seems to me that renewables have taken a lot of the blame in this kind of blame game of the actual root cause of the blackout. But has it been politicized, do you think, and how it has affected public opinion of green energy, wind and solar in particular?
So the energy debate in Spain has been polarized for a while, even more polarized after the blackout. Some say there was too much green generation. Others say renewables were not correctly managed and safeguards didn't act, but it wasn't really renewables' fault. I guess that both sides are now cherry-picking data about the blackout just to defend their position. And you can also see that there is some confrontation in the finger-pointing between Red Eléctrica and the Spanish utilities. After the blackout, it's easy to hear people debating nuclear power and green growth, often with very little scientific basis. So I guess the debate around the blackout is like taking a sports convertible off-road and the car eventually breaks down. You could say it was the car's fault, the road's fault. You can also say the driver is to blame for choosing that car. Or maybe a four-wheel drive wasn't really an option. So I don't even know how to change a tire. It's probably better if you ask the mechanics.
Fantastic, Pablo. Thank you very much. A great analogy there.
Thank you, Richard.
So, what impact has the political haze surrounding the blackout had on investment into Spain's energy market over the last 6 months? I'm very pleased to be joined by Cristina Rental, research lead at Aurora Energy Research. A warm welcome, Cristina.
Hi, Richard. Thank you.
And Daniel Garasa-Saragodoy, who's energy engineer and Europe solar analyst at Wood Mackenzie. Also, a warm welcome to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Richard.
I'd like to start by just asking you, Daniel, are we any the wiser what happened on the 28th of April?
We are getting close to it. Many things have been rejected. And so I published part about it. I have read it. It doesn't provide like the root causes, but it provides you like some clues about what happened and what didn't happen.
Okay, fair enough. And Christina, what's your view here? I mean, if I was to blame, and I knew I was to blame, I'd probably keep quiet, wouldn't I? Because I could open myself for a lot of legal trouble.
Well, yeah, I think they've got around that by calling this the factual report. So they've very much stuck to the facts of what happened and what they know. And there will be another report in 2 months' time, which will come out with more root cause analysis, etc. So it maybe wasn't the silver bullet that we were maybe hoping for in the sector. A few takeaways that I've gotten from this is I think we need to pay more attention to distributed assets. So behind the meter, the TSO has very limited visibility on those, and they're kind of shouting about that. And I think maybe that's played more of a role than perhaps we first thought, unleashing kind of the events that happened. And we're already seeing, actually, just on Thursday, we saw a proposal going through for even more emergency measures being requested from the TSO. So I think we're definitely seeing some reaction, even if we haven't got a complete explanation yet.
I mean, I think I'll return to the sort of, if you call it, the blame game as a bit later. But Daniel, do you think the blackout has become sort of weaponized? Has it become a stick with which to beat the sort of renewables, so sort of solar and wind sectors?
I think a little bit, yes, but because here in the sector, every lobby is always trying to get what it wants, and those who hate renewables will hate renewables no matter what happens, and those who hate fossil fuels or other technologies or nuclear or whatever, they will still hate without any other reason. Like what I saw is after the blackout and some weeks later, there were a lot of analysis that were just about true political. And in the end, in my view, it's like this was a technical issue about not using your tools properly. You have some kind of tools, you have a hammer, you have a screwdriver, and you have to use them in a properly way. But it's not the fault of the hammer if you use it wrong, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. And I think, what's your view here, Christina? Do you think the whole debate, the discussion in Spain has become very politicized or polarized even?
Yeah, I think I actually agree with Danielle. I think it really depends on which side of this you come down on, right? And then who you talk to. So I think it's always been fairly politicized. If you think about the renewables, the nuclear, maybe not so much gas in Spain. But definitely kind of renewables and nuclear has always been a hot topic. I think what has happened is that, let's just say like the everyday person is now getting involved. You know, my parents were asking me what happened. My friends, like people who are not in the sector are now much more interested in this. Those are the people who definitely look for someone to blame, let's say, but whose fault was it? Whereas I feel like when you're looking at it from a little bit inside, from a more technical perspective, you tend to look at it a little bit more holistically, right? You see these chain of events, very complex things. Suddenly everyone's brushing up on their physics that they did one class on at uni. So I think what has happened is that it's really pushed the electrical sector to the forefront for like the everyday person. And maybe that is where we get this feeling of it being a bit more politicized.
I mean, you said, Christina, you referenced the TSO that put a message to the market just very recently, just before really when we went to air. But can you tell us a little bit about how power systems in Spain have changed since April in response to the blackout, if at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to. So I think, rather than kind of maybe changed in any additional markets, it's the changing in the way that the TSO is thinking about operating the current ones, right? So we're seeing quite a much more proactive approach. So this kind of safe way of operating the system, which basically means on the kind of technical restriction side, so what we would call the curtailment, looking at this much more on a contingency basis, where you say, okay, what happens if actually one of the elements in the network fails? Being a little bit more proactive on that sense. And we're seeing just overall much more volumes in those markets. And that's consistent with actually what they've published just recently as well. They really want to try and shift a lot of the management of the grid of those services from real time to more on the day ahead to try and be a little bit more proactive. So that's what we're seeing with a huge focus on voltage control as well, I would say.
Absolutely, Christina. I think some have said maybe the TSO could have been at fault for not being cautious enough. Do you think it's gone from being not cautious enough to being overcautious, Daniel? What do you think?
I mean, probably, because one of the things regarding solar and also wind is that these are intermittency power generation assets. What does it mean? That they can switch from full power to almost no power in terms of seconds. How is that? Well, solar power assets, they generate in cloudy days, and that's something many people don't know. But when there's a cloudy day, the generation shape, the curve, it's not kind of a curve, it's more like a horizontal curve. And when there is like sunny day and big cloud happens to be around your PV plant, you can have a spike, like your generation drops a lot. And then it can increase a lot through seconds, minutes. We can say minutes if we want. What happens when you have a huge PV plant and something that you didn't count it for, like a cloud, happens to be around there? You can lose like 20, 30, 40% of your generation in seconds, in minutes. What happens when most of your solar generation is concentrated in the west of your country? That when something happens over there that's unexpected, you can have a lot of variation over there. And this doesn't also only applies to solar, it also applies to wind. It's the same concept. You can have like some wind blowing and then stop, but wind has some capabilities to manage that. Also does solar. The point is, this happens not only in the big utility scale plants, but also in the distributed generation plants. And the TCO does not have a lot of view over there. That's a problem they are looking forward to solve. And in the end, I feel that the way the TCO has been operating since the blackout is like, hey, I want to use the safe mode. I'm going to use way more gas. And we have been burning like 5 terawatt hours more than in 2024. And of course, we have increased the solar generation, but not at the rate of we have increased the power, the installation in Spain. So this year we're going to install around 5 gigawatts of utility scale, more. So we are going to reach about, I have it here, 38 gigawatts of utility scale, plus around 13 gigawatts of distributed solar. You need to control this properly.
And what you're saying, for those listeners who are unaware what a DSO is, it's the distributed system operator, which deals with, especially with wind and solar plants, lower, slightly smaller scales, if we could say. And I think that's very interesting what you're saying now, because that's often, if you don't have visibility of what's happening there, and you're talking huge amounts of volume, huge amount of capacity, really, that you don't know what's going on that ground level. So it's not just the TSO that needs to react quickly here, or is even at fault. I think that's clear. But it's interesting you say that they're going very much in safety mode and burning more gas, just to be absolutely on the safe side. That's maybe a clear reaction to what happened. Christina, if I can ask you, I mean, you mentioned as well voltage. One key conclusion was that the one of the root causes of the incident was over voltage. Could you explain what this is and how it has changed since April?
Yeah, so maybe I'll try and do it as simply as possible. So at the moment, the kind of voltage, how it was managed previously, was through this technical restrictions market. It's mostly provided by, these services are mostly provided by gas, which is why at the moment this safe mode is effectively asking gas to generate more. You have kind of, this really helps. I think what happened was when the plants started tripping, some of those plants were actually providing what's called reactive power, which was helping the overvoltage situation. So as soon as they trip, this just all goes kind of way worse. So it's just a compounding effect. And we just see that this is when kind of the tripping of all of the plants came. So I think government, or that has been on the table for a long time, about separating out this market from the technical restrictions, having actual incentives for plants to provide voltage control services and or inertia. I won't go into too much detail on the technical of maybe Daniel could even speak more to that, but providing these services that basically give stability to the grid in a specific incentivized way in the specific areas that need it. So as Daniel was saying, you have a lot of solar in the south, you have your gases actually in, on the north or kind of closer to, more on the Catalonian coast. So you have your large thermal plants kind of much further away from the renewables, and it really starts to become localized when you have these issues, and this is what we're really seeing. It's been going on for a while, but I do think there's been an acceleration, and it's been pushed to the fore of we really need to get these services kind of set up in the right way that incentivizes plants to actually participate in those services and provide those services. And of course, batteries are perfect for these services, and we barely have any installed battery capacity in Spain as well.
So that could be part of the solution there. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Do you think, Daniel, then this is part of the problem in Spain, that you have these very sort of these concentrations of different generation capacity and technologies in different parts of the country, and it's hard for them to kind of react to each other?
I mean, yeah, that's kind of a problem, but how can you solve that? Because in the end, if you are a solar owner, what you want is to produce in the cheapest location. And that's going to the sunniest places in Spain, of course. So what has happened that we had record year installations. 2022, 2023 was around 9 gigawatts installed in Spain. Last year was record installations. And this year we are also going to have around 5-6 gigawatts around of solar PV installed in Spain. Is all located in the south? Not, but it's mostly located in this Extremadura and Sevilla, Ciudad Real, these southwest areas. It can be a problem to manage properly, because any kind of, not only in terms of operation, in terms of revenues, like we have one big problem in the solar sector in Spain called cannibalization. It means that sunny days, we could power Spain just with the solar capacity that we have, for instance, in April or in September, because there is low demand and we have enough capacity to power the country with that. The problem is that owners don't get revenues during sunny hours. And some substations in these areas, they have curtailments. Curtailments means that you could produce, but the TCO says, hey, this is highly saturated. You can't produce more. And this is another problem apart from the blackout. So there are some issues in the solar system currently in Spain. And I feel that the blackout was just another issue in this sector currently.
And I think, to be fair, Daniel, these are problems experienced all over Europe as well. Certainly, we had the same, in Sweden, when there's a glut of wind, that this impacts and brings, negative or even very low prices. I call it the challenge of the energy transition, the 3 C's, isn't it? It's congestion, curtailment, and cannibalization. But absolutely key issues that need to be resolved if we're going to succeed in the path to net zero. But Christina, I mean, you mentioned the safe mode the TSO is operating. How long will the TSO be operating in this safe mode? And is this a question that the industry in Spain needs answers to?
Maybe I'll start with the last one, because I think the answer is definitely yes. I think it's a question that we get a lot. It's very difficult to actually kind of predict how far. I do think that the announced measures will help, because it will give more clarity on exactly what they're looking, what issues they've identified and what they're actually looking to solve, which again is moving this. I've only had a quick look, but kind of being more proactive, shifting kind of from real time reactive to the day ahead phase. And that will help generators have a little bit more clarity. Does it then stop impacting them? Not necessarily. And I think obviously it has an impact on the system cost. At the end of the day, the consumer is paying all of the any time that a gas is activated in in one of these ancillary services or technical restrictions, that cost feeds right through to the consumer, right? So it has been stated that these measures need to be, they're extraordinary and temporal in nature, and I think that's right. So it's still depending on how long that actual temporary nature will be. But I do think until we're able to have services set up for voltage control, for potentially inertia, more batteries in the system, maybe it'll be a slightly less safe mode. But I do think that the TSO will continue operating in a very conservative manner, at least until the real root causes have and then there's already been a lot of, I think one of the issues that I've seen is just the data and the exchanging of data, the communication. What a lot of the measures that have come out since, you need to give me information not every minute but every 30 seconds, or for example, or much more detailed information much more frequently, so that I can actually understand what's going on, to actually make use of the hammer, to go back to the to Daniel's phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. But do you think, obviously interconnection would also help, but they take, a long time to construct and obviously are very costly. In the meantime, you mentioned batteries. What's the outlook for batteries in Spain? Are you seeing, obviously, the low prices and the curtailment and the glut of supply that Daniel mentioned should incentivize more batteries, should it not? Are we seeing that in Spain?
Yes. So I would say this is also a kind of a little bit of a complex answer, because the easy one is yes, we've got a huge pipeline, gigawatts of batteries in the queue with grid connection. Grid connection to eject, or on the generation side. What is causing a large delay is actually on the demand side. So you need this connection for demand, so to charge from the grid, which is obviously fundamental for the battery business case. And a lot of developers are kind of waiting on that, and that is causing quite a delay. And this is true for demand, industrial demand, hydrogen, data centers. This is true for all demand. We're in a place where there's a lot of, not to repeat myself, for the demand for the demand injection points, let's say. And this is really causing a lot of issues. And I think, going back to kind of how you can solve some of these issues, the technical aspects, if you think about the curtailment, for example, incentivizing demand where you have that generation, and especially things like hydrogen data centers that don't necessarily need to be in a specific place, like the solar wants to be in the good solar region. If you can incentivize in a certain way, either by tariffs, as they do so in France, for some battery assets, you can really have you can really focus in on where are those areas that are having issues, and where do I actually want that demand, and how can that help me? And I think that's one of the things that we're lacking in Spain, and that could definitely come out of this. And it would also help the battery business case as well.
Daniel, what's the current investment climate like for solar in Spain? Have investors got a bit of a kind of been a bit shocked by this? Are they kind of being very holding back maybe from the country? And also in terms of what Christina's saying, in terms of batteries and also data centers, is that an area that's kind of increasing investor interest in Spain?
So in the short term, I would say that we're still going to see a lot of installations, less than 2023, 2024, but at least more than 4 gigawatts this year and the following one. But the investment climate for the medium term is bad. There are bad prospects, to be honest. And it has nothing to, we already account for that before the blackout. It's not because of the blackout, it's because of the market dynamics. Currently, we expect for the next 2 years to solar capture prices. So the revenue that you get for generating during solar hours, so the merchant price at solar hours is going to be below 30 euros. And that's below LCOE. LCOE is the costs that you have. So it's a KPI for the generator, for the owner. I need to sell above that cost to have revenue, to have profit. So if you go merchant, you won't have profit in next years. I'm looking forward to sign a PPA. Okay, no, off-takers don't want to sign PPAs in Spain. Why? Because they could just get merchant prices. They are pretty low at sunny hours. So standalone PV, their prospects are not good, are not great. What we see is that in 2028, 2029, there will be an increase in capture prices. Why is that? Another topic in Spain, nuclear phase-out calendar. So every time there is a nuclear power plant that goes off, that switch off, prices will go up. That will be not great, but it will enhance a little bit solar installations, of course. But the prospects for standalone PV, and I mean in standalone PV, are not good. What are the solar owners? What are they doing? Those who are already in the market without a PPA, or they didn't got awarded in an auction. Well, they're looking to install batteries, to collocate some batteries over there. But is that great? Well, you need to invest more capex. If you are losing money currently, it's not great to ask for more equity to, try to save your business when it's not guaranteed. Because you don't know how many, what your competitors are going to do. And that's probably one of the things that we have. In the end, there is oversupply in solar, oversupply in Spain, and then you have distributed generation. That's growing. We are seeing that in the next 4 or 5 years, Spain is going to change from a utility scale market where developers were installing big PV plants to a more residential, commercial, and industrial market. That will be a change in terms of the solar landscape in Spain.
I think there are important lessons for the rest of Europe, and I think there'll be a lot of eyes to follow what's happening, in the Iberian Peninsula. Certainly, in terms of what you're describing here with the residential, commercial, and industrial solar, because that obviously reduces the demand for grid, for power from the grid as well. I'd like to just round off with a couple of questions. Maybe quite. I don't know whether they're easy to answer, but do you think we'll ever get a conclusive answer over who was to blame for the blackout, Christina?
Yes, but I think that answer will be a number of things / bodies. I think the answer will be yes, there were probably things along the way, but I do think we'll find out eventually.
We'll find out. What's your view, Daniel?
I mean, yes, I think they will share the blame. In the end, it was a human error, and operational or strategic planification, whatever. There wasn't an earthquake in Spain. Nothing special happened that day. It was a day with low demand. The system failed. Well, many things to address over there.
Do you think we've learned enough from what happened in Spain to ensure that it doesn't happen again, Daniel? Not just in Spain, but elsewhere in Europe?
I think so. I mean, obviously, I don't think any blackout will happen. I hope so. But yes, I mean, we need to allow renewables to participate in every market, also in regulation, in all the aspects of grid control, because they can do that. They have to. They must do. And the TCO needs to be really strict. And renewables are capable of doing grid control. Nowadays, with the power electronics that we have, both wind and solar can do it. And you need to start to get importance to distributed generation. You need to start getting serious with that.
Absolutely. What's your view here? What do you think, Christina, in terms of, do you think we've learned enough so that, steps can be put in place to avoid this happening in the future?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit more on the pessimistic side here. I'll try and explain why. I feel like those of us who are kind of looking at this beforehand, were probably already raising, our hands saying, like, look, this is going to become an issue. I don't think anyone expected a blackout. I'm not saying, we forecast the blackout, but, more issues in the grid, more curtailment. Like we were already seeing that, since around 2022. So quite a few years before there was a blackout. And I think what this has done is, as I said, like really push it to the forefront. So people are kind of starting to prioritize it now. But I do think that there is it's very slow to kind of the learnings that you take to then actually implement them. This unfortunately usually takes quite a lot of time. So if we're talking new markets, we're talking new procurement, we're talking, power electronics or, changing the regulation, this can take quite a while. So I would encourage other countries to really try and preempt. This is coming across all countries that are going to have more renewables and less thermal generation. And that's basically all of Europe, right? We're interconnected. So I think it's put it into the forefront of the conversation, which is great. That's the first step. But in terms of the learnings and actually seeing those learnings applied, I'm not so sure we're at that stage yet. I'm hopeful we'll get there, but I think it might be fairly slow, unfortunately.
Well, there's some time to go yet. But Christina and Daniel, thank you very much for being guests on the Plugged In podcast from Montel. Fascinating discussion, looking at what actually happened, but also the repercussions and a glimpse into the future of how to learn from those lessons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you very much, Richard.
And you listeners, thanks for listening to this episode of Plugged In. If you enjoyed this discussion, please like, rate, and follow to make sure you get the latest podcast episodes as soon as we release them every Friday. We'd also love to read your reviews of the podcast. It helps us to keep up to date with what you, our listeners, think of our podcast and what content you want to receive more of. Finally, you can head to montelnews.com for more news and analysis from our team of journalists across Europe and beyond. See you next time.